Project Inspire and the Mindflex program. This is 5 life-changing ideas. Please stay tuned because the number 5th is a life changer. I call this concept a walk in the park. For this, I need you to imagine for a minute that you meet yourself on your deathbed, 120 years old, and there you're going to ask yourself 2 questions. What was the hardest thing you ever did? And what was the best thing you ever did? And I'm going to answer both of those questions for you. I know, mind-flex stuff here. So the hardest thing you ever did, sitting here right now watching this video, you have already done it. If you know how to read and write, I'm going out on a limb here. If you don't, I don't need to know about it. But if you know how to read and write, you have probably achieved one of the hardest things you're ever going to have to achieve in your entire life. I'm not saying there aren't other things you've done, but that one, at the very least, is one of the hardest things any human being will ever get to do. There is hardly anything that is going to be more consequential, more impactful than that very feat. To go from illiterate to literate is an amazing accomplishment. In other words, if we were to have all the human beings that have ever lived on this planet, I think they say it's about 10 billion, 20 billion people, whatever the number happens to be, and they're all alive today. The number of people who can actually read and write as a percentage of the total is infinitesimally small. Maybe 1%, maybe 1%. So you are part of an incredibly small group of amazingly accomplished people that is mind-boggling. Not only is it meaningful, impactful, but it is difficult like crazy. Like most of those people and those billions of people that were literate would think to move from illiterate to literate would be like climbing Mount Everest in your pajamas without shoes. Like it's just an amazing, like people just don't realize how difficult such a thing is. So you've done one of the hardest things you're ever likely to do. It's hard to imagine you're ever going to match or beat that as an accomplishment. Anything else you do pales to insignificance relative to that accomplishment. I'm not saying you shouldn't go for great things. Go for it, but relative to that one, that's the piece de resistance. That's the cherry on the pie. Everything else is a piece of cake relative to that one. Okay, that's the hardest thing you've ever done. You've already done. Now, what's the best thing you've ever done? Relative to where you are standing right now, you are yet to do it. We all anticipate a phenomenal future. We have had great lives, thank God, but we all secretly, or maybe not so secretly, suspect and hope that the best is yet to come. So the hardest thing you've already done, the hardest thing you've ever done in your entire life, over 120 years, you've already done at this point. And the best thing you're ever going to do in your entire life is yet to come. Now, you have never been smarter than you are sitting right now. You have never had more ideas, more concepts, more understanding, more wisdom than you are right now. Relative to today, everything previous, you were stupid. Nothing personal. I was just as stupid, if not more so. But relative to today, you're at the peak of your intelligence. Tomorrow, please God, it goes even higher. But we have never been as smart as we are sitting right now. So now realize and appreciate this. You did the hardest thing in your life when you were, relatively speaking, stupid. Nothing personal, again, don't take this personally, right? Me too, all of us. But you did the hardest thing when you were relatively stupid. And you're going to do the best thing in life when you're, relatively speaking, smart. Therefore, what? The rest of your life is going to be a walk in the park. That's piece of cake. No problem whatsoever. Now, as we're going to see, there's more to this, but that's step number one. That's the first mind-boggling life-changing piece of wisdom. When you assimilate that concept, just conceptually, not how you actually feel about it, but how you think about it, when you realize that's a truth. That really should be the case. That is the reality of it, of the description of our existence. Whether you feel that or not, that's another point, which we're going to get into. But nevertheless, it's just a piece of wisdom that's really how it should be. Once you've learned how to read and write, and once you've got to this degree of level of intelligence, the rest of your life should be a walk in the park. That's step number one. That's the first piece of wisdom. What's the second piece of wisdom? Is that it isn't. We don't feel that it is like that. We're all struggling. That's why you're watching this. In other words, if your life is a piece of cake and you just open up the mailbox in the morning and checks are just coming flying through. People are just sending you money and everyone agrees with you and your kids are a dream and your spouse is a dream. Not that they aren't dreams, and everywhere you work, wherever you work, it just everyone, yes dear, yes boss, yes whatever, right? It's just everything is working, and you eat as many donuts as you want, and you lose weight, and you go to the gym, and just opening the door gets you in shape, and you instead of losing hair, you're gaining hair, and it's like everything is just, if that's your life, okay, then you don't need this, and you probably wouldn't watch it. But if you're like most people, you'll be noticing that as time progresses, it's almost like a calendar. As time progresses, it seems things seem to get more difficult. It isn't, as we've just said in point number one. It's in fact the reverse of that. So why is that? So I want you to imagine for a minute, and this speaks to a big misnomer or error in Western thinking. But I want you to think back for a little bit and imagine for a minute your 5-year-old comes in one day and says to you, I'm never going to learn how to read. Never going to learn how to read. Why do you say such a thing? Well, because the teacher in school, in kindergarten, said I'm stupid and I'm never going to learn how to read. I'm too stupid to do it. Or it's tough to learn. The teacher said it's tough to learn how to read, and you don't have what it takes. Right? What would you do? Get another teacher. Right? When your kid comes in and says it's too hard to learn how to read, or I can't do it, I can't master. What do we do? We make it easier. We make the problem easier. In other words, if you go and spend some time with kids who are learning how to read, right, in the good old days, I'm talking about 150 years ago, if you learn how to read, there would be a teacher in the front and they would say, this is a cat, C-A-T, cat. And that was it. Now, they break it down into C, K. Can you say K? And they go through each, in other words, what do? They break it down into the smallest possible component part that they can possibly imagine it can be. And if they can break it down even smaller than that, they do that too. In other words, when things get difficult, they don't say to the kid, be tough. Imagine for a minute, you walk into your kindergarten's teacher, into the kindergarten classroom, right? And the teacher walks in and says, I quit teaching and there's no other teacher. Here's a pile of books. This is all the 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds, 7-year-olds. Here's a pile of books. You learn how to read by yourselves. What would happen? Nothing. Nothing would happen. If one kid in 100 learn how to read, it'll be a miracle. All those kids would turn out illiterate. But that's exactly what we do now. In other words, that process, which works incredibly well in learning how to read, which is one of the hardest things we've ever done, is abandoned when it comes to everything else in life. After that, we just dump on the kids, and as you get older, it gets worse and worse and worse. In that kind of way, which is just make it difficult. And if you don't succeed, we blame ourselves. We blame the students. And we pile on them and we give them all these pep talks, right? Be tough. You can do it. Drill yourself. Be like Arnold Schwarzenegger and all the other tough guys out there. I pulled myself up from the bootstraps and I made it because I was going to succeed, etc., 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 etc. Right? And which is completely counter of how we achieved anything in life. In other words, if you are stuck on anything, whatever your next step is, whatever it is you are challenged with right now, whether it's in your personal life, whether it's in your financial life, whether it's in your business life, whether it's your friendship life, whether it's family, whatever it happens to be, emotional life, whatever it happens to be, right? You are stuck. Why are you stuck? And that's very important to understand. We all come out of an educational process, and it's genius, and it's brilliant, and it's given us incredible ideas and incredible concepts. And you are going to go as far as those concepts and as far as those ideas now. If you're watching this, you are probably one of the 1% richest people on this planet. If you make more than $30,000 annual income, you're in the top 1% of the richest people on this planet. If you make more than $70,000 annual income, you're in the top 0.1%. 0.1% of the richest people walking around this planet. That means 99.9% of the whole planet thinks if they had your money, they would never complain like you think if you had Warren Buffett's money. And they're closer to being right because it would make a significant difference. If you're living less than $30,000 in annual income, you probably don't have indoor plumbing. There's a thought for you. And there's many other things. But I'm not going to go into poverty, wealth. That's a whole other story. But nevertheless, what do you do the 99.9% of the world's population cannot do that enables you to earn this amount of money? And the answer is the education that we've gone through, not just schooling, but society, the civilization that we live in, trains us to think about problems and issues and work and all kinds of things that the rest of the world just can't do it. They just can't do it. And there's a whole long story. A lot of economists talk about this, but we take for granted, and therefore our education gets us to so far. We're at that limit, and now we've got to cross over. We've got to expand into the unknown universe, into the places no one's gone before. And this is not so strange. Not Bill Gates, even though Bill Gates too, but Steve Jobs is a great example of that. Edison's another great example of that, of people that went to the edge of what the Western world has to offer and had to take it a step up. In hindsight, their step up seems obvious. When Henry Ford automated manufacturing, it seems obvious. But at the time, it's revolutionary, and you have to try other things and get past that point. And that's true in a global sense, manufacturing giant sense, but it's also true on a personal level sense. We're at the edge of the universe of what there is to know. And to go past the next step, to be the first person to ever learn how to read and write, takes tremendous insight. It's like it's a whole new thing. And the way to do that is not to do it by ways that didn't work before, but to use the methods that have worked before. And that is breaking it down into the smallest possible components parts. If you're challenged with now is difficult, and everyone's next step is difficult because that's what's stopping us. We all get to the point where we don't know what to do. Our education hasn't given us any answers to this. Everyone gets to that point, and the next step is going to be the breakthrough. The people make the breakthrough. Sometimes the breakthrough is just a personal thing. But sometimes the breakthrough is, Apple computers. But everyone gets to that point, and by breaking it down into the smallest parts, I always like to make this point that Steve Jobs wasn't born with a computer chip in his mouth, and Warren Buffett didn't have making stock tips in his crib, right? And Edison didn't turn the light bulb above in his nursery. All these people had to think in ways that that enabled them to succeed. If Steve Jobs was born 10 years earlier when computers were not a thing, or 10 years later when it was already gone, right, would he have been the great success he became? And the answer is yes, he would, because he thought in ways that enabled him to find great success. He wasn't built with that thinking. His brain wasn't structured that way. He just learned how to think that way that enabled him to succeed. When you think that way, you will succeed the same way too. And one of those ways, it's very interesting because if you look at all the people who succeed greatly over history, and I've done quite a bit of research on this, whether it's Nelson, whether it's George Washington, whether it's Amelia Earhart or Rosa Parks, Nelson Mandela, all of these people achieved success in remarkably different ways, but they all thought the same way. You will not see a quote from Winston Churchill that's out of concert, that isn't aligned with something that Thomas Edison didn't say. They all think alike. And as opposed to the famous saying, great minds, sorry, this is the famous saying, I always get that mixed up. It's along the famous line, great minds think alike, and that's true. And if you think the same way, you also will have that great success. Excuse me, English isn't my first language. That's a joke there. So if you think those ways, what's that way? Break it up into smallest component parts. That is how people who achieve great things think about the problems that they are facing. And therefore, whatever you're struggling with, figure out how to make it smaller. Take the smallest part you can possibly make. And that's going to be very much part of what we're going to be talking about in the next steps as well. The first step should be a walk in the park. The second step, don't make it harder, make it easier. Right? If you can't figure out how to make it easy, you're not going to succeed. There's an easy in everything. There's an easy way of achieving everything, and you have to figure it out. There's a very famous story with Yaakov. When Yaakov leaves his home and goes to live with Lavan, the story is told, the story in the Bible, that he comes to a well and there's a giant rock on it, and it takes a lot of shepherds to move this rock. Why? There's a whole other story. But anyway, he's got to move this giant rock, and it takes many, many men to be able to move it. Right? And he moves it by himself. It's astonishing. So Rashi comes along, quoting Chazal, that tell us that how did he move it? As easy as popping a cork. As easy as popping, that's it, right? What's Rashi coming to tell us this for? And if it would have been difficult, it's still a tremendous accomplishment. I mean, if somebody who could move a Boeing 747 by himself, that's no small thing. I'm pretty impressed, right? So he could move it by himself. Okay, whether it was easy or difficult, what difference does it make? And the answer is no, that's exactly the point. He understood in every problem in life, there's an easy. In every problem in life, there's an easy. If you're finding this issue difficult, it's because you haven't found the easy. Find the easy. And that's where great success is. You can teach millions. If you went to anybody 150 years ago, definitely 1,000 years ago, and said we're going to have universal education, we're going to teach the peasants how to read and write, they'd think you're crazy. They would think you're crazy. Right? These people are never going to learn how to read and write. They're ignorant. That's how they thought about people. That's how people who are in the upper classes thought about everybody. They're just the unwashed masses. They're never going to do it. Right? We created a system by which everybody, no matter what intellectual capacity you have, learn how to read it because we figure out how to make it easy. Okay? That's the second point. The third point is, and this is a big misnomer in the Western world, listen very carefully, there is no such thing as tough. Human beings don't do tough. The truth of the matter is, nothing does tough. Gorillas aren't tough. They're doing what they do because it's easy. In other words, an elephant can uproot a tree and a monkey can climb a tree. And both of those things are tough for us. But for an elephant, it's a piece of cake. But for an elephant to climb a tree, or for a monkey to uproot a tree, that would be tough. Everything does what it's built to do easily. The things that you do well is because you find them easy. And this is a tremendous misnomer, again, in the Western world, because people who do things that we think are difficult easily is not because they're tough, it's because they find it easy. There are things that you do that other people look at you and go, I wish I could do that, whether it's dieting, whether it's exercise, whatever. I love these people who do marathons. Nothing against doing a marathon. It's just not, I don't have a problem with doing a marathon as long as it's in a nice car with air conditioning, right? But the people just like, they go like, if I don't do a marathon once a month, I feel out of place. They just love it. They're not being tough. They're doing what they love to do. When you do what you love to do, it's easy. Now, to everybody else, it seems tough because for them, it is tough. There is no such thing as being tough. And the more we use this language with other people, so we look at other people that aren't able to do what we do easily, and we look down on them because, like, come on, be tough. When we should really appreciate that we're not tough either. We're just doing what we do easily. Easy. That's just how it works, and that fits right into all these points, which is, you got to find the easy. There is no such thing as tough. And when you think that there is such a thing, and I know people that have students of mine that have tremendous accomplishments in things that everyone would think is tough, who are like falling apart in something that everyone else thinks is easy. And they can't do it. And those people are really challenged because they think of themselves as tough, and therefore they should be able to do it, and they go into tremendous denial because I should be able to do that. I mean, that's easy. I mean, if I did all that, if I achieved all these things, then doing this thing should be a piece of cake, and it isn't, because everybody gets challenged with something. And what you have to do is figure out, the second point, which is you got to find your easy. Okay, so the third point is there's no such thing as tough. The fourth point is you have to find the people who find what you think as tough as easy. One of the founders of Alcoholics Anonymous, his name was Bill W. And they asked him to sit in. It spawned a whole revolution in dealing with these addictions. And one of the things it spawned was Overeaters Anonymous. So they asked him to sit in one of the meetings. And other than the fact it's food or alcohol, it's really the same conversation, exactly the same steps. It's all the same dialogue, same concepts, everything. So they asked him to sit in. And afterwards, they asked him, what was it like? He said, you cannot cross-pollinate. Alcoholics are alcoholics. Overeaters are overeaters. And this is a point I talk about a lot in my book. Please check it out. Win. You can get it on Amazon. The book is called Win. He said, alcoholics are alcoholics. Overeaters. Why do you say that? He says, because the whole time I'm sitting there hearing these people go on about I was struggling for half a day to eat a cookie, and I ate the cookie, and then I ate the whole box of cookies, and then I went on a binge and blah, 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 blah. Right? He said, the whole time I'm thinking, don't eat the cookie. Like if you've got a heart problem and you're overweight and everything, so don't eat the cookie. And he knows like that doesn't help when it comes to alcohol. because he's not challenged with food, he's challenged with alcohol. The opposite is also true. The one who's challenged with food is not challenged with alcohol. In other words, the person who's challenged with food is challenged with food, but he thinks about alcohol, or she thinks about alcohol in a way that makes it easy. So he looks at the alcoholic, he looks at the gambler, the sex addict, all the other things, the crack cocaine, the heroin addict, right? And he looks at them and goes, what's the problem? Just don't do it. You know it ruins your life. Come on, get your act together. And when it's not your issue, it seems easy. And that's true. But what you need to do is find the person who finds what you're challenged with easy. In other words, if you're challenged with alcohol, go find the person who's not challenged with alcohol and learn from them how they think about alcohol in ways that make it work and easy for them. The other way of doing it is to think about the things that you find easy and apply that thinking to tough. You have to dissect it a little bit. How do you think? If you're not challenged, a lot of people are not challenged with alcohol. And that's great, right? So how do you think about it that it makes it easy? And apply that thinking to the things that you are challenged with. That thinking is the key. Well, how do you think about it? And just apply it to food, and you're gonna find it's easy. We all know how to think about things. I know lots of people are challenged with food, and what do? And they don't get anywhere. I'm gonna be tough, and I'm gonna take it out of the kitchen. And I'm gonna have it, and I'm gonna be disciplined and everything. And it just doesn't work. You have to think about it. Because when you have alcohol, when you're not challenged with alcohol, you can have everything, beer around, wine, vodka, scotch, everything will be there. And it doesn't bother you one iota because you're not challenged with it. So how do you think about it and apply that thinking to food, okay? Or whatever you're challenged with, okay? That's number 4. All right, so number 1 is a walk in the park. So number 2 is find the easy. Number 3 is we don't do tough. Number 4 is think about the things you find difficult. Think about them in the same way you think about the things that you find easy. And the number 5th is a life changer. Don't take on big goals. I know it sounds kind of crazy and so counterintuitive, but it's incredibly important. The rabbis say there's a concept of learning from your enemy. Who's that enemy? What's called in Judaism the Yetzer Hara. And the Yetzer Hara only challenges us in small goals. Nobody broke a diet by eating a chocolate cake. What they started off with is a cookie. No one fell off the wagon by drinking a bottle of scotch. It was a tiny shot. The way we lose is through small incremental things. 1 cigarette smoke. That's it, right? And therefore, any one is really bad, and you've got to stay away from it. The opposite is also true. Great accomplishments come by small goals. And that's what we do on Rosh Hashanah. This year, it's going to be tremendous. I'm going to run marathons, and I'm going to lose 100 pounds, and I'm going to, blah, 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 all these incredible things. It comes to nothing. Don't take on big goals. Take on small goals. The biggest accomplishments I ever have in my life are the times when I say, every day now, I'm going to do the smallest possible thing. And that's the trick. Whatever it is you want to achieve, whether it's moving in the direction of food, whether it's work, whether it's personal relationships, whatever you can do, whatever it is, the direction you want to go in, figure out the smallest possible thing that you can possibly take on that you couldn't possibly not do. So I had, for instance, someone who's trying to be a writer. And she says, I sit down in front of the computer and she's a great writer, and I can't be bothered, right? So I said to her, what's the smallest possible goal, achievement you can have every single day? And she said, right, is writing 1 word. I say, every day you're going to write 1 word. Every day, if exercise is your thing, you're going to exercise for 3 minutes. 3 minutes. That's all you're going to, I could do 3 minutes. I mean, come on, right? In other words, what is the goal you can have that's the minimum that you cannot possibly do? And you're going to find that if you keep to that goal, it's only going to be 3 minutes. That's all I'm going to do. I'm going to write one word. That's all I'm going to do, right? I'm going to write to one friend, whatever it is that you want to get towards, whatever it is. I'm going to read one page, learn one page, whatever it happens to be, one paragraph, one sentence, whatever it is. I'm going to learn one Hebrew word a day, whatever it is you want to do. You're going to find that because you've stepped in that direction, you're going to, most of the days, if not every day, you're going to do much more than that. But your commitment is only for the smallest amount. So when you're feeling down and you can't be bothered, you keep the smallest thing, and it'll keep you in the game along that path. You're going to see it's a game changer towards life-changing decisions that are going to put you on an incredible path to success. Good luck, everybody. Please stay in touch. Let me know what you think. If you have any questions, feel free to connect with me, Baars, SBAARS @h.com. And I'm on YouTube and all kinds of other places. Thanks so much. And thanks again for Project Inspire.